So with our handsome Mr. R, I wanted to work a little bit more with going to our spot. So again, if he's a little excited, sometimes, I went to go grab a few more little tidbits, some snacks. You can see that sometimes when I pop in and out of the bubble, he does get a little excited. So your best bet is if he doesn't quite know how to rock a sit or work another skill when he's too overexcited, always think movement behavior, especially when starting. So a lot of times people instantly want the dog to do right into the behavior they were hoping. Like, so the puppy's pulling because they're overwhelmed or stressed or excited. There's some emotion or some environmental thing that's getting them to be too flustered. And then they're constantly like yanking on the puppy or saying, no, sit, over and over, or, whatever it might be. So the problem with stationary positions when your dog is unable to function is that you're ruining your ability to communicate with your puppy for later. And you might even be poisoning or ruining the skill, like for example, the sit. So every time your puppy hears a cue and they don't actually perform it, they're either losing out the meaning behind the word, getting more confused, hearing us talk, but then not really having much direction or understanding behind it. So I find that a lot of times in people's frustration to have the dog be really well behaved in the beginning, that they forget how to build up those skills to have value for the puppy while comfortable, and then be able to slowly, you got to chew them, Sarah, slowly be able to increase the difficulty or the distraction level. If your puppy is really struggling, ready, Sarah, bed? If your puppy was immensely struggling as they're entering or exiting a building, or they're moving from one environment to another, that would be something I would practice with a doorway that doesn't have much value. So I know I had mentioned door exercises, one of the other puppies, Miss Maple, and she was working with just an X pen in here, and I was showing how to practice doors and then how to build up value in holding back, but also how to use maybe a target like a mat or a snuffle mat to build up that going to a target around the corner versus stepping out and then rushing through the doorway can be helpful. So obviously, it doesn't really matter what the trigger of the situation might be. I'd always recommend don't practice something in the moment. You want to practice and rehearse it well before you actually need it. So training in the moment that you need it to be happening, like when grandma or someone comes to visit, is not an ideal way for you or the puppy to learn, because a lot of times it creates frustration, anxiety, and then your puppy still masters the thing you weren't really loving, which could be barking or whining or jumping or pulling throughout the experience. So right now for Mr. R, as we were blabbing, I want him to work a little bit with his place and work a little bit with the stay. So we do have some of the other beauties sometimes blabbing a little bit in the background too, because they're like, why not my turn? So let's say, for example, Mr. R, I'm going to tell him to stay. He's like, hold up, lady, I thought we were going to rumble. So while he's staying, I don't mind if he adjusts and get comfortable, but I'm going to, again, feed for all these lovely reps of him being stationary. If he gets up and wiggles, it could be that he's getting tired. It could be that maybe he needs a bathroom break. There's a lot of moments where when your puppy is failing, it's still communication, and we have to figure out what could be going on. So again, we might go again, bed. Chewing is still very hard. Yes. And I'm going to tell him to stay. We're going to see if I can go ahead and feed rapid fire, a couple little tidbits so I don't lose his interest. And right here, I'm going to give him one last little tidbit. I'm going to say, all done, and we're going to get our guy up and wiggling. So I want him to think that the benefit of the stay happens for being in the stay, not for coming out of it. So again, we might go bed. And remember, stays can happen anywhere. So you don't have to go ahead and rock a stay on a target bed or a dog cot or a mat of some kind. But for a lot of puppies and even dogs, it can be a great way to give a visual in an environment that you'd like them to stay there versus anywhere else in the bubble for that moment. So, but you can work stays anywhere in different environments, but it's one of my favorite ways to build up value in vegging or relaxing in a spot, where for a lot of the pups, I know we've discussed this, they tend to not really have an off switch or a way to kind of relax while things might be going on. So this is beautiful. So we might feed Mr. R one more little tidbit. Nice job. And I might say, all done. Ready, Rocky? And we'll get up and wiggle. So your stays, though, don't get paired with a recall. So that's where you would instead use a weight for a recall. So for example, we would still be rocking our sit anywhere we are. We would tell him to work the stay, and he doesn't have to be on the mat. So we would stay, and I could take a little lean, and then I'm going to feed him for not moving. When he, for example, is getting comfortable with the stay behavior, I don't want to add too many of those D's all at once. So right now I am adding a little bit of distance, and my air just came on, so that's a good distraction. Sorry, sir. He's like, was listening. So if, let's say, there's a noise distraction and I lose my handsome guy, I'm going to regain his little sit, tell him once more to stay, and I'm going to stay really close by so I can make this behaviorally seem more attainable because he's not as overwhelmed with the noise that's going on above with the AC. So right here, let's say we're going to end this little stay. I'd feed him his last little snack, all done. We get up and we wiggle, and there's no food for coming out of the position. So this day could be something to start to hone in on. But remember, you're not going to go right into working stays or place behaviors if something hard, scary, overwhelming is going on. So if, let's say, someone's coming to visit, but it's someone he's a little bit apprehensive about or he's way too excited, you could ruin going to your bed by pairing it with that spooky or way too exciting thing. So it doesn't mean that your babe can't build up to that and work into moving into a spot or a position, but make sure that you're not forcing stationary positions when your babes might be showing signs of stress or anxiety or over arousal. I find with those moments, movement can be much more beneficial. So if, let's say, my puppy was struggling going to his bed as someone, was coming into the home, I would have my puppy leashed and I'd be working maybe some loose leash walking up and down the hall or from the kitchen to the living room and back and forth. Or I might even do some find its if I can. And maybe you're behind a baby gate in the living room while the person comes in through the kitchen. So you could move into a little find it and then reorient your beauty back to you, feed them for that engagement, and then continue on your merry way and do a few other skills. So right now, he's like, hold up, I noticed a distraction. Ready, Rocky? So if I lose him, I might try name recognition. I could do my positive interrupter with a little kissy noise. But the main goal is that you're feeding for all these little glimmers throughout your practice for things that you'd love to have him master for down the road. Nice job, sir. So like when we're working with some of this loose leash walking, he's now finding value in reorienting to me or staying honed in. He's like, I don't know how I feel about the weird wall. Good job, sir. Ready? We'll do another little find it. But he's really doing a very nice job for his practice today again. Nice. Good job. So he's like a little spooked by the wall. I think it made like a weird little noise as the AC came on because this wall is partially attached, but it makes some little creaky noises when the air pops on and off sometimes. So it sort of surprises him sometimes. Yes. But if he ever shows signs that he's a bit nervous or apprehensive about something in the environment, make sure that you don't force him to go closer. So what I mean by that, so I know we were discussing this when we were working a couple weeks ago, and it was with my son was here too. And Mr. R got all of a sudden a little bit nervous about the new little human. So remember, you don't want to pair the spooky thing with the food, because if that ends up happening, your babe might get closer to the thing they would have never gone that close had there been no food involved. So make sure that he can approach or disengage at his rate, and that he is not being forced to try to pick between food and feeling safe. So if, let's say, at his rate, like he did earlier with my son, he went close and then he would disengage, perfectly fine. But let's say he went a little closer, looked a little bit more comfortable, I go yes, and then feed for moving away from my son. So Mr. M says, worst day ever. I'm just going to do a couple little find its for Mr. M just to keep him busy. Ready, sir? And then we'll go into working a little bit more with Mr. R. Taking turns is so hard. So another thing I like to bring up is, let's say your puppy is enjoying a chew item. I know we've discussed a little bit in class too, where when your pup has an item that is valuable from their perspective, we want to practice with things he's allowed to have, to work, letting go, and then that we're not always the end of fun. So sometimes while your puppy's enjoying a chew, I sometimes like to do the treat and retreat. So I might toss a couple snacks and then walk away. So I'm not going to take the item away from him. I'm not going to take food and try to exchange it by pulling it from his face. I like to make it where as I'm passing by, there's sometimes value in me going near. And then there's so now he's like, well, maybe I should check in. So then as your puppy sometimes does a little check-in, you could also mark that moment they check in with you versus the item and feed for that. Nice. Good job, sir. So I'm not going to take this prize away. I'm making it seem okay. So I might go, Rocky. Yes. And he's like, I would like to bring it and eat at the same time. So for coming towards me, I don't mind if he brings it with him here and there. But the main goal is like when he's enjoying something he's allowed to have or have several chews or toys is practice having him bounce back and forth between the different items. Because remember, we want our puppies, nice, or adult dogs, to feel that having an item is non-confrontational. And remember that when they do have something they're allowed to have and they learn that you can let go and it doesn't have to be spooky or overwhelming, that can be very helpful for when your puppy has something they shouldn't have. So if they don't know how to let go of something they can have, how are they going to let go of something they shouldn't have in the first place? So, and remember, your puppies and your dogs are amoral. So they don't understand right or wrong or the concept of this is one item versus this is another item and one is okay and one is not okay to play with. So these are things they have to slowly learn and figure out while being in our bubbles, but make sure that we're giving a lot of good, positive outlets for our puppies so then what their natural chewing behavior or mouthing behaviors are being applied to items that you find again will be safe for them, but that they have those natural dog outlets. So right here I might go, Rocky, yes. See if I can get him to do a little check-in. Nice job. So we're just getting him to find that there's value in taking little breathers. Because if, let's say, every time I interrupt him, I take the thing away, then me coming nearby is the end of the game. And we don't want it to turn into that because then every time I pass by, he might try to covet something and scoot away. Mr. Handsome, Mr. M says it's his turn next. So, but we'll give, oh, Kiva says, maybe I'd like to wrestle with Mr. M again. Excuse me. So we'll give Mr. R a little breather as he's trying to get the snacks out of the hoof. And then we'll work with Mr. M in just a second and we'll rotate through some of our beauties again. But he's doing a stellar job. Remember that I know today is his last session of the 4. If you're thinking about continuing, but maybe doing the structured play versus the doggy day school, that's fine. Just check in with me. I know as of right now, the next one is kind of full, but I might have sometimes the option to have another extra pup here or there join for the playtime. So, but again, definitely check in. Mr. R is going to take a little breather. He's doing a really nice job with all of his skills, and he's been doing great with his meets and greets with my little one. She just said she didn't feel like being filmed, so she, again, can do her own thing. But she was helping me earlier with Mr. Handsome working those little highs as well and pass-bys. So all in all, I think he's doing a very nice job, so keep up the good work, and we'll give Mr. R, he's like delicious, a little break. You handsome man.